Right, basically I'm now going to press out these seams here, which is brilliant. Also, this is a tailor's ham, and also you have a, I don't know, a shirt sleeve, little ironing board thing, gadget, accessory or whatever. These are fantastic when it comes to pressing curved lines, okay? Because obviously, if you've got a very high pressure iron, which this is not, it's not that good, you can actually, if you're pressing on a flat surface and you have a curved or like a bowl shaped pattern, you can actually press it and stretch it flat, so you kind of like, that curve will no longer be there, which is a real problem. So whenever you do anything with corsetry, you always want to make sure you retain your curves. So just, you know, kind of press over it all with this ham, okay? Just go along all of them, even if it's a straight line, it can't hurt just to use a ham. Okay, also, if you're coming to any curved lines, you want to make sure you notch it. So, because if you have a curved line, for this example, let's say this, it sits better when you open it up and press it flat if you have notches in it, okay? It just allows it to spread open evenly. Now, do I have many curves here? Okay, this is I've got a curved line just here. Well, kind of, it's very barely. And you can just go in and just notch it, okay? Like every inch or so if you've got a nice curved line. And this will just allow the seam allowance to spread evenly, okay? And that'll give you a nice smooth curve. Okay, so you just want to do this to your pattern wherever it needs it, okay? And just start to press it open, okay? So I'll show you that in a minute once we've finished. Now, obviously you can see it's all been put together and we have pressed open all of the seams, which is great, and we have the notch marks just to make sure when we've got a curve. The reason why we only stitched to these points here and left this a little bit open at the bottom is because we're about to attach, let me grab this. We're about to attach this panel piece here. You see how that basically links on there? And the notches match up with the seams, okay? That might just help in the future. Right, what happens is, when we stitch, so let's say we stitch this together, okay? We just stitched it with the sewing machine. We would basically stitch over this seam here. Now when that opens up, it folds back on itself, and this can create a really bulky, thick lump, which can be really unsightly and can also alter what's normally a really beautiful smooth curve. It can start to form like sharp points. So the reason why we've done this is basically to turn it into a notch rather than a seam. And the way you do this is simply, if you go along and you cut to that point and snip off, and you do the same with the other side, cut to the point, snip down. This now acts as, let's say, a notch. For example, this is a notch. It's almost as if this seam isn't here anymore, and we have this kind of, this little opening. So when these two bits are stitched together, the stitching or the thread will basically run over this point here, and when it's folded back, it'll fold back nicely on itself. And you can also get rid of, for example, you can also trim these down to much finer, same with this other side, and you can also trim this bit off here. I'm not going to because I haven't sewn it yet, but I'll show you later. And this now becomes a much smoother, cleaner line, okay? This is really good practice with almost every single pattern or anything that you produce or construct. Whenever you have a seam that intersects another pattern piece, for example like a T-junction, if that makes sense, you should always do this stitch to point line, because it just creates really beautiful seams as opposed to really bulky chunky ones. What I'll do is, once I put this piece on here, and obviously the other side as well, I will show you a seam which hasn't had this applied to it, and you'll be able to see the difference. And especially when you're working with such thick material, you really notice this kind of really unsightly, bulky, it's just crap, it just doesn't work. Okay, also, to go along with this idea of cutting these little kind of points off, if you imagine when this lies flat, these seams basically interrupt or overlay each other. Now with thick material, and because we're using about 3 layers in this corset, this is going to become a bit of a nightmare, especially this is down near the crotch and you want this to be quite a smooth area, otherwise it's going to cause some problems. So, the easiest thing to do is just to go in and trim off a little amount here and a little amount here. This just stops them from interfering with one another and allows the corset to just remain really nice and flat. Okay, that's great. And also the same with these bits. I'm just going to cut this off here, like we did before. Here we go. And this is a nicely put together or maintained pattern, or whatever you call it. and just steam them. So there you go, see, none of them interfere, it's nice and smooth, lovely. Perfect. Okay, so this is an example of those two different kinds of seams, okay? So this is the one, the good one, and this is obviously the bad one. Anyway, so here you can see, look, we've just literally stitched over that seam and you've got this kind of like this bulkiness here, okay? And also, it doesn't show you here because I've done it quite neatly, but sometimes when you stitch over this bit of seam can basically get caught in it and it can be stitched over like this, and then you've got something you really don't want to happen. So this, you know, that won't actually get caught over when you have this. So for example, this is the T-junction idea I'm telling you about. So you've got this seam here, and then where it intersects you've got these two bits, and this is cut away so it doesn't overlap in any way whatsoever. You've got this tiny little bit, there's no lumps, it's all nice and smooth and